Hello and welcome to HITMC, where we love talking about the latest strategies, news, and insights from the world of healthcare marketing. I'm Colin Hung, and sitting down with me today is Ben Dillon, Chief Strategy Officer at Geonetric, a web development and digital experience agency working with healthcare organizations. Ben, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on with you today.
Ben, we recently ran into each other at the SHSMD 23 conference, and it was so awesome to see you in person again. It had been several years since we had seen each other.
Yes, yeah, it's been far too long, really. It's great to get back in person occasionally at some of these conferences again.
Yeah, there's something that just can't replace meeting a friend in person. Virtual is great, but in person is so much better.
Absolutely.
Now, Ben, when we got together, you were telling me about a recent survey you had conducted, and I was immediately intrigued. You know me, I love data, I love surveys. Your survey was pretty cool sounding in that you surveyed and got an opinion on what patients were factoring into their healthcare preferences. Is that? But can you maybe give us a synopsis of what this survey was and how you conducted it?
Absolutely. So, digital survey, we used an online survey panel, and we were really looking to answer a set of questions that were popping up as we were doing digital front door and digital strategy work with clients. And again, our clients are hospitals and health systems around the country. We wanted to look at a typical healthcare journey, right? People start by researching conditions and they go through and they select doctors, the whole thing, and communicate with people afterwards. We wanted to look at that experience and answer some of the questions that we get from healthcare organizations pretty routinely, right? Like, where are they doing some of these things? Or we have more and more organizations that are looking at apps again and saying, okay, where in the process does it make sense to do some of these kinds of things? And so we took a look first at that whole journey in some ways, and then took some key pieces of it and did some deep diving to understand better, where do people want to be doing some of these things? What are some of the factors that people are considering today, and what's more and less important as they're selecting providers, as you mentioned. And sort of dig into some of those pieces and tease out how do we make sure that as we're helping these organizations craft these strategies, that we're putting them in the right place to meet consumers where they are, health consumers where they are.
Now, for our listeners and for our viewers, we'll make sure to put a link to the survey that we're talking about in the show notes and in the article, so that way you can go see it for yourself. But Ben, I got to be honest, one of the most intriguing parts of the survey for me was a result that I wasn't expecting. And that was one of the questions asked, the last time you sought care, how important were each of the following factors in making that decision? And the one that I thought would be a lot higher in terms of rank was ratings and reviews from other healthcare consumers. But relatively speaking, it was in the bottom half of factors, beneath things like accepting insurance and have timeliness of appointments and convenient locations and stuff like that. Given the hype and everything, I thought that would have been a lot higher on the list.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good reminder for us that a lot of the competition happens in the digital realm, but at the end of the day, the product has to be right for the consumer, right? So there's a set of must-haves when they're making these choices. Can I get an appointment? Do you take my insurance? I think there was more focus than we thought on things like understanding costs and transparency in some of that, understanding quality, some of those kinds of factors. The convenience, the core convenience things like are you open when I need to go? Right? Can I get to the place where this appointment's going to be? Like, all those factors are really, they determine what ends up in the selection set to begin with. And then you really get into the competition of, okay, are we, do other people think this person is great to work with, or are there other problems with the experience that people have and things like that, and getting those kind of peer reviews kind of factors in that next set. The ones that surprised me out of that list was that the existing relationship with that doctor was also in the bottom half, right? So, yes, I might have a relationship with a doctor, but I think we've given a lot of credibility to this idea of loyalty over time, and I think it's really degraded to some extent. It's just not as strong a factor as it used to be. So yes, if I have an existing relationship, that's great, but honestly, I'm not going to generally go outside of my insurance plan for that relationship. I'm not, and what we're finding now is, hey, if you're not open for extended hours and that's what I need, I'm not going to wait till tomorrow anymore, right? That relationship, it was much further down the list. So it was interesting to see that, that just some of those core elements of the product of healthcare delivery really, really matter a lot for people right now, and they're willing to go to someone they've never seen before if it's easy, if it's convenient, if they know what it's going to cost. Some of these other elements have become really, really important in that decision.
Well, and you just kind of alluded to it there. Patients and health consumers, we have a lot more choices now, right?
Absolutely.
We don't have to go to that specific physician because our parents went there, right? Like we have some options now in terms of, there's all the way to retail health, which wasn't, I know, included in your survey, but in terms of just within the insurance network, it's, I have some choice, and insurance companies actually have made it a little bit easier to help me find other providers in the network, right? Whereas before I had to know. Now there's websites, there's portals and things to help guide me. So the choice is a little bit easier nowadays than it was in the past.
Yeah, we did actually look a little bit. We tried to, and this was when we kind of spent a lot of time trying to think through how to ask, but we wanted to get a sense of how much of an advantage, or do kind of incumbent your local health system, how much does that matter to people relative to some of the other competitors out there? And we ended up using telehealth as sort of our proxy for how much trust you have in some of these new players coming into the space. So we did look at that a little bit, and it did turn out that my local health system has a little bit of an advantage, but it's not a huge advantage over some of the other players, right? So if your insurance companies bring those things to the table, that's pretty close. Pharmacies, right? Well, you've already got a healthcare relationship there, and there's a certain level of trust that comes with that. But versus Google or Facebook getting in this game, sort of tech companies or startups or things like that, there is some advantage to those local health systems and really the brands that people already trust for healthcare. It's maybe not as big as some organizations wish, and it certainly varies a lot depending on who it is that's looking. That's another thing that we kind of looked at here is we had a bunch of other criteria we were crossing this stuff with, and we really sort of found, when we look at things on an age perspective, there's some differentiation between behaviors, and particularly we looked at do people consider themselves to be early tech adopters or not, and kind of the early adopters versus late adopters of technology. There were some really dramatic differences in the way that they looked at a lot of things within the spectrum. And I think it's important to realize that our health consumers are not a homogenous group. They're not all the same. They don't all act the same. And so there's a whole group of folks who really still want to pick up the phone and talk to someone. There's folks who really don't want to do telehealth, and we need to make sure that we still are creating again, a product and experience that works well for those folks, as well as being able to connect with people who are maybe younger, maybe early adopters of technology, and those things are not 100% aligned. It's important to remember that too, that just because someone's young doesn't mean they're really tech friendly, and just because they're maybe a little bit older doesn't mean that they haven't embraced technology in a big way. But there are definitely some different segments of the market, and we can connect with them and engage with them, but sometimes we need to be in some different places in order to do that effectively across the board.
So Ben, was there anything in this survey results that confirmed the belief that you had? In other words, it didn't surprise you when you saw those results?
Well, obviously the early late technology adopter thing was kind of a theory that we were playing with, and really looking at that to say, are there a set of things that we're looking at that are kind of shiny new technologies that this, a portion of this population is going to be excited about? And we thought that, that'll probably align with people's general view on technology adoption pretty well. And so, I think we certainly found that certainly there are very big differences in behavior there, or desired behavior. And that really, I think, confirms some things that we were imagining in that. And again, there were also some things that surprised us a lot. So, again, the strength of the existing relationship with providers was one of those things. And actually, people's perspectives on privacy was another one. We asked some questions about, are they worried about using some of this technology with personal information, and do they trust healthcare organizations to protect that information, and really is it okay to collect some of this stuff in order to give me a more personalized, tailored experience through some of these channels? And by and large, I was surprised at how much people were okay with that. They really trusted healthcare organizations to do this stuff. They really, their desire to have a relevant, tailored, personalized experience overrode most of those concerns around privacy of some of the sensitive health information in a lot of cases.
Ben, why is it so important for healthcare provider or organizations to keep tabs on consumer and patient sentiment like this? Like, why is it important to continue to either conduct your own surveys or to look and see what surveys have been done? What is this data really useful for them?
Well, we're at a really interesting time when it comes to digital care. Certainly digital care delivery through telehealth has become a much bigger factor over the course of the last 3 years than we'd anticipated. But also, just as we're trying to engage with consumers, healthcare is really going through some massive changes and really upping their game in terms of trying to meet consumers' expectations. Now, to be fair, consumer expectations have also taken a huge leap forward over the last couple of years, right? That we look at the pandemic and we say, the easiest way to frame how it shifted is we've sort of accelerated all the big trends we were seeing by about 10 years in a period of about 2 years there. And so consumer expectations for all sorts of things are just in a different place, right? If I order pizza, I expect that I know if the pizza's been made, if it's in the oven, if it's in a box, if it's in a car, I can track the car to my house, right? And then, the next day I have a doctor's appointment. I sit there for an hour and a half because they had no way to contact me and let me know that they were that far behind, right? That is a big mismatch of expectations there. So it does seem like a lot of organizations are really trying to take huge steps forward, but there aren't a lot of examples out there of health systems that have already gotten there, right? We're all working on it. Some are at the bleeding edge, some are not. But there's not an established model that we point to and say, this is the organization that's done it right, and everyone's going to try and move to be what that organization is. We're all taking steps forward. We're all struggling with a lot of tool-related issues because the infrastructure within the organization is not ready to necessarily interface with all these things and support what consumers need and want out of that. And so we're all trying to craft the experience at the same time. And so as we are cutting new swaths through the forest, really getting a tab on whatever we can to understand what consumers want us to do, where they want to meet us, where they are, so that we can try and find them there. Those sorts of things are more important than ever. Are more important than ever, because we are trying to create some new kinds of experiences and execute on some very different strategies than we have in the past. And so we're all learning, and the more that we can try to kind of do some of that learning before we try and craft the experiences, I think the more likely that we'll be successful on that path. We're still going to iterate. We're still going to find things that don't play out the way that we expected them to. But I think if we can get 20% better or 30% better on those first attempts, that's going to really help the momentum of all the changes that a lot of health systems are trying to put into place right now.
Ben, where can people go to find out more information about Geonetric?
Well, Probably not a surprise, our website, www.geonetric.com. It's just like geometric, only with an N. And we'll have a link in the show notes as well with see where you can get the survey results from us as well.
Well, Ben, really appreciate all the information you shared with us today. It's a very interesting survey. Thank you for alerting me to it. And again, it was so wonderful to see you earlier this year.
Absolutely. Great to see you. And thanks for taking the time with me.
Hey, if you enjoyed this interview as much as I did, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give us a review on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you're listening and watching. Also, head on over to hitmc.com to access free resources, industry news, and insightful articles. You can also connect with us on Twitter using the hashtag HITMC. I'm Colin Hung along with Ben Dillon. Thanks for being here.